This internet connection it says weak. I'm not sure why. So hopefully you won't lose us. And if you do, just come back and watch later. Welcome. Whoa, well, it's loud. It's testing. It's working. So today we have a very special treat for you. It's just us again because no one wants to come out of the monsoon. Right, Kevin?
Yeah.
I
didn't want to.
Kevin didn't want to come out in the monsoon.
I'm mostly kidding.
Yeah, no, mostly kidding. We are going to elevate you a little bit so that we can see a little bit better here. Whoa. It's like that one movie that has that one thing that keeps moving. What's that movie? It's that terrible movie. Like this big monster comes and destroys everything.
Godzilla?
No, not Godzilla. No, it's where they had the terrible camera movement that it was like make everybody sick to the stomach when you went to go see it.
Sounds like a boring movie.
Anyway, I'll think of it and then I'll remember later. So it's something about it's crazy. Anyway, today is Spurgeon's birthday. That's one of the reasons why we had the picture on there. Thank you, Corey Clement, for reminding me that it's Spurgeon's birthday. So in honor of Spurgeon, we have our Spurgeon picture. Also have something else today, just kind of advertising a little bit. These nifty Isaiah journals, the ESV scripture journals. We were talking about it Sunday morning. Kevin, that's yours. So, so if you would like one, and we're looking to get some in bulk from like Christian Book. If you want to buy it yourself, you're welcome to buy it yourself. But ChristianBook.com seems to be the cheapest. Yeah, you can bring it closer so people can kind of, those of you who are looking. So on one side are the scriptures. The other side is just lines for a notebook. So anybody who is taking notes, if that's your practice to do that, we encourage you to do that. It's a nice gift for somebody too. If you just want to be nice and give it to somebody in the congregation. I mean, some people have asked me about getting them, so I'm just going to go ahead and buy a few. And if you're interested, just let us know, pay us back. At most on Amazon, I think they're about $8. But at Christian Book, they're like $5 or $6, which is even better, which is awesome.
We'd rather support them anyway.
We'd rather support. I mean, well, don't say that too loud here. We don't want to get a yes, but we would rather support a Christian book distributor, honestly. So anyway, but great resource. Good, very easy to read print, which is awesome. The lines, in my opinion, probably could be a little bit bigger. I like a lot of space to write, and I don't write really small. So if you're a big writer, you might want a bigger notebook. But if you're not too nitpicky, honestly, it's not bad. And for the cost and what it is, it's great for especially the sermon series we're going to be doing. So I wanted to show you that. Also, we don't have other people today because we've been calling a bunch of people and making a long list for the next few months. So I've contacted Jim Soderberg will be with us in the next few weeks. He's committed to coming, and which is great. John Feldenzer, his wife Karen said she probably would do it. A few other people, Jenny Constantine said she would like to do it one day. Next week, though, we have a very special guest who has spoken here at the church before in the evenings for the seminars, Bob Benny. Many of you know Bob. He is not a member of our church, though he does call this his adopted church, his adopted Baptist church. He is actually Lutheran. He belongs as a committed member at St. John's Lutheran, and is a wonderful man, retired professor from Roanoke College, and has done a lot on ethics and talked a lot about vocation. Just a wonderful blessing to have this close to the church, and who literally lives close by as well. So we're going to basically have him share a little bit. The book I have with me is Thanks Be to God, a Memoirs of a Practical Theologian by Robert Benny. So this is his memoirs, basically talking about his life. So, but he would be, I'm sure, delighted for you to get it and to read it and to give him some feedback next time he comes. But when he comes next week, we're going to ask him just a few questions about what that means. What does it mean that God has worked in his life as a practical theologian? So, and I wanted to talk with Kevin today and kind of put him on the spot. We're really not planned. This is not a staged thing anyway, other than usually the people who share kind of have some time to plan. But I just wanted to ask Kevin, what in the world is what's the difference you think between a practical theologian and say a more professional theologian? What would you argue might be the difference? Because Dr. Benny wouldn't call himself a professional theologian in the sense of systematics or something like that. What are some of the differences that you think?
Well, and I might say there's a finer line than some people do.
Okay.
Some people make this just sharp divide where you're either a pastor who's actually working with people and you know a little bit of theology, or you're just this guy who's obsessed with theology and up in his ivory tower, just completely separate from, real matters, real church matters. And PhD for a theology guy. And
I would hope so.
Yeah, a lot of my theology teachers at Liberty and even at Southeastern, they're also pastors and serve in the church in whatever ways that they can.
That's right.
So being a practical theologian is really just, to me, I would imagine it's just living out your theology. Living it out and teaching others to do the same.
That's right.
While also being that spiritual, intellectual leader.
Yeah. And why is that important? I mean, I agree that, there isn't maybe as strong of a line. One of them, of course, it's your job to be involved in knowing every little detail, or as much as you can, as far as a professional theologian, just like a contractor, like an electrician. Mm-hmm. I don't need to know everything about electricity. Mm-hmm. If I want an electrician to come in, I'll call them in to fix my wiring. I don't need to do that myself. Because I'm not trained in that way, and I would probably just hurt myself.
Right.
But is there that need for that level? What's the difference between like a pastor or even a professional theologian who might need to be able to operate on that level versus like a in the pew, like needs to know about theology, appreciate theology, but doesn't necessarily have to work as much in those areas? How would you distinguish that?
Yeah, the professional obviously is an important linchpin, 1,000-year-old discussion.
Yeah.
And then some.
And then some, that's right.
And so we do need those people who are willing to go in and be specialists in whatever area. I'm never going to be a Greek scholar, most likely. Greek or Hebrew.
Never know.
Yeah, we'll see the next few years. But it's doubtful that right. I'll be in some specialty area where I'm studying Greek extensively, or but that doesn't mean that I won't be using Greek or Hebrew or just basic systematic theology, some of the different biblical theology stuff that's going around. Like that stuff is important to have in the conversation in your local church. You ought to be able to work with it, but fortunately, there are these other professional guys who we do get to benefit from their efforts, and we kind of get to take a shotgun approach to all these different specialists and try to incorporate some of that into our practical theology in the church.
That's right.
So
there's this interchange where you need all of that. It's not every individual needs all of that, but as a Christian community, we need all of that. So, and I think that's important to say too, like we don't have to know. Some people are just really thirsty for knowledge. Some people are just thirsty, period, if you know what that means. But they have this insatiable need to know as much as humanly possible. And unfortunately, sometimes that knowledge will not necessarily kill you, but can literally like the sun that was outside, the rain outside just a minute ago. Now the sun's outside. But it will be like a deluge on them that will just, wash them away. Some people think that that's their call, even though they're a lay person there, but their call is not. And when Dr. Benny talks about calling, he's not saying he's a professional theologian. He'll use theology, obviously. That gives him input into what he talks about with ethics and as we think about government and politics and all those things. But that's not his main area, his main field. But you're saying that a pastor should, in some sense, always be a pastor theologian then.
Yeah. Even
though he's not a professional where he's literally spending all of his time in his ivory tower studying, he is spending time with people. I think that might be one of the biggest differences. Not saying that professional theologians don't sometimes have to come out of that tower because they do want to be connected with people.
Yeah, I don't think there's that sharp divide where you're either one or the other.
That's right.
They do come out and they do.
And they have to, right?
Yeah, you have to.
Well, you have to if you want to, if you care about the church, right?
And most of the ones that I've had as teachers, fortunately, do care about
That's right.
church.
That's right.
And you could probably say the same thing about yours.
Absolutely.
And what's his name? The Isaiah guy.
Alec Motyer. Yeah. Very warmly. I mean, if you're looking at those the books that he did, his thicker volume is a little bit more professional. But Isaiah Day by Day, which is one of the books that I talked about, the practical. Oh wow, we were offline for a second. I hope we're still there. Otherwise, we're just talking to ourselves, which is
looks like it.
Okay too. So anyway, but that's something to think about, is that if you love the Bible, you have to want the Bible to connect to people. It can't just be something that you put in yourself. And now this is not weird for me to say, because most people think I'm kind of extroverted. Kevin, you are not extroverted. A fair statement. It's nuggets of Jimmy John's. Oh, bless you. Thank you so much.
Well, she was at the sanctuary door trying to get in.
Oh, I told her to call me.
Wow.
Oh, she did call me. Bless her heart. Oops. Whoops. Oh, well. Yeah, I'll give her a tip sometime. The tip is don't come out in the rain. And no, I'm kidding. I'll definitely make sure she gets covered there. So Freaky Fast makes it freaky fresh. I'm going to eat this as soon as we're done.
We're not sponsored.
We're not sponsored. We don't get any money for this. Wow, and there's more people seeing my buffoonery. But the day by day, understanding Isaiah as a book that is kind of lofty, right? I mean, some of the language, it's a big book to take on. If you're trying to read through it, take your time. I encourage you to read it. I encourage you to take your time through it. And I'm hoping that as we go through it, you'll be encouraged. But people like Dr. Benny cares about people in the pew. If you're a theologian or call yourself a theologian and you don't care about people who are in the pew, I think you have a real problem. So, and this is something that I think we've seen. Kevin has seen. Kevin is more introverted, fair statement, but Kevin cares about people. Why do you care about people if people, like most people who are more introverted, it steals your energy to be around big crowds, right? Fair? Yeah. I mean, so why in the world do something that makes you uncomfortable? Why do that?
Well, I mean, as much as it goes against the American ideal, it's life isn't about just being comfortable.
Yeah.
You got to do what you're called to do, for one thing, and also it's just good for your soul, good for your spirit to be with other like-minded believers and exhort one another in word and in truth and in love. And that's really what I think it comes down to when we're talking about practical theologians is
that's good.
You got to have the word backing your exhortation too. So like someone like Alec Motyer, who is clearly a specialist in Isaiah. Like I can't think of anyone else who's spent as long as he did in Isaiah and made his own translation of Isaiah. Who does that?
Who does that?
But
he spent a lot of time in that book.
Glad he did. Just he did that though, and you've said like he clearly loves the church, and he did that for the church so that it could be a tool for them to use, whether it's his commentaries, his Old Testament background stuff, or just his devotional. Like he does it all for the church, and it's to equip them to live according to how we've been called to live. And
that's good.
I mean, that's what Paul does. Whenever Paul exhorts someone, I mean, what comes first? It's you got the doctrine, and then you have the exhortation.
That's right.
We got to know why we're doing what we're doing.
That's right. That's the undergirding. And the two things that we often separate them in our minds, they're not separate. I mean, especially, it's interesting, even as we go through the book of Isaiah, we're going to see that there's this, it keeps coming back again and again. These themes are kind of interwoven through all of Isaiah of of judgment and hope, and that Messiah is coming, and that Messiah is the only one that the king, God's king, is going to be, which is sometimes interesting. God's king is sometimes God himself.
Mm-hmm.
And then other times God's king is Messiah. So even there you see like hints of like that Messiah is both God and man. There are hints throughout Isaiah on that are very clear, I think, when you put the pieces together and ultimately see Jesus as the fulfillment of that. And that's important for us to understand too. God has called us to be people who see the different parts of his word as a whole. He's not a partial God. It's not like we have the right to say, well, God can tell me what to do, but really all I care about is the gospel. Or I can care about the gospel, but not care about what he's asked me to do. It's not like we can, just put that aside.
Right.
I mean, in that sense, we always need law and gospel. We always need, because we're sinners, to be told where we're wrong and to be told how we can have hope. So I think that's important for understanding a practical theologian. And I think Dr. Benny tries to help us with that. And I think all the people who actually spoken, whether or not they realize it or not, they're practical theologians too. And if you're listening and you're a believer, then you're a practical theologian. You have thought about how the gospel is applied to your life. If you're a young person, you'll think about how in the world does the gospel impact my thinking and my living now? How does that change, how I live, but also how does it change who I am? And those two things kind of go hand in hand. It's a holistic type of thing.
I mean, if you break down the word theology, it's the study of theos, the study of God.
Yeah, that's right.
So I mean, if we're trying to devote ourselves to this God and follow this God, you got to know this God.
That's right.
You got to know how he's revealed himself.
That's right.
And I mean, what is it that Calvin says in the Institutes in the Trinity section, where he says,
that's right.
Beforehand, we just described this empty word God to a being that we don't really know.
Right.
But after we're fed, we get to this point where we're using this word to describe our triune salvific God.
That's right. It's not this generic, and that's interesting how people do that, right?
Right.
I mean, sorry, did you have more with that? I mean, that's coming out of that. I'm thinking like culturally, when people use the word God, so often they always have and everyone does this, right? Even if you're not a believer, you have some concept of God.
Right.
And that might be a old fuddy-duddy that someone told me I'm supposed to believe in, but I think is irrelevant, or some judgmental God, or if you're a believer, I mean, you think of Jesus Christ, you think of the cross, you think of, your hope in the resurrection. There are all these different things that you think of that grant you great peace, even a sense of victory, a sense of purpose, right? So and a sense of order, that the world has meaning, so God means so much more than just God. I mean, it's
I'm watching the show, and I think this is something that our culture struggles with, is that God and Christianity and what the culture calls God, it's not necessarily the same.
It's not the same thing.
And,
no.
I was watching the show Boy Meets World, and
yes,
great show.
Boy Meets World.
And there's a few episodes that are spiritual, I guess. There's an episode where one of the teachers is in a motorcycle wreck, and one of the kids actually joins a cult. Do you remember that episode? Sean joins a cult.
No, I don't remember that actually.
Yeah, man, you can't get away with that on Disney Channel.
No, that's funny.
So they're all throughout the episode. They're asking Sean, "Well, Sean, what do you believe?" And they say, "Do you believe in God?" And at the end, Sean's kind of on the bed of his teacher, who is very close to him, who is in a coma from a motorcycle wreck. He's crying out to God, and he says, "Well, I'm here. I'm listening. I know you're there." And people came away from that episode and were saying that it was Christianity, that they were Christians. And I'm thinking, well, how do you know that? Where is the gospel? Who is the God that they're addressing?
Yeah.
where's Jesus? You know,
Right.
it could be Christian.
Could be because of, I mean, and their culture has kind of
Right.
had some of that.
Right.
I mean, in general, our culture has had this Judeo-Christian worldview, right? I mean,
Right.
even though it's not always the Christian worldview, there's this sense that there's this one powerful, almighty being that exists, probably taught by their grandparents or by television. I mean, most of the time, religious depictions are in movies, even of Catholics, occasionally Baptist. Usually, if it's Baptist, they make us look like crazy people. Yeah.
Well, and where it really gets controversial and where you see that divide more is with the personhood question. Is
Yes.
God a person?
Yes.
Because, I mean, believe it or not, there's a lot of just mysticism and Eastern stuff.
Everywhere. Yeah.
Especially way out west.
Before,
But it's just.
sorry if you're from out west. We do
we
love you.
anyway, yeah.
John MacArthur is from out west, and he's not
A
crazy.
beacon of light out there. But this mysticism is just kind of creeping up where God is.
Hollywood is a big part of that.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
Hollywood's they're all about being spiritual. They're not
Right.
religious, they're spiritual.
Whatever that means.
I don't know what that means. I think it means they smoke too much weed, but
Probably.
but
But God is like a force, or
yes, it's like Star Wars or something. I
pretty
mean,
much, yeah.
you know, this concept.
Logos.
yeah. Well, it's like almost a Greek concept of philosophy that says that there's some power out there, and maybe it's personal, maybe it's impersonal, but we really don't care. And I think that's the tricky thing. Like,
And you also can't know that God.
and there's no relationship.
Yeah, that's
It just
also an old,
exists.
that's also an old philosophy.
It's also a pagan philosophy.
It is, yeah. There's this God, and some people even say the only way you can describe this God, like you can't even describe him. He's so indescribable. Is by analogy, imperfect analogy. And,
Well, I mean, Thomas Jefferson held to this deistic understanding of God that says he doesn't do miracles, and yet, you know, he created the whole world kind of like a big clock and just wound it up and let it go. But he doesn't interfere. He doesn't care. He hasn't done anything else.
Yeah.
So no miracles.
Yeah.
There's morality, but there's morality based on what is versus what it should be.
Right. And
Which is really confusing.
so that makes religion is just our attempt to understand this removed God, that we
Unknowable
can't-
being.
Yeah, that we can't even. So the second that you say God put on flesh and dwelt among us,
Oh, that
it's-
changes everything. So the incarnation then
Yeah.
is like central. I mean, it's not just central to Christmas; it's central to everything.
It's still countercultural.
Oh man, it's crazy culture. It's, you know, I was talking with someone today, and you know, they were struggling, you know, to believe. They're like, "Well, I'm a very logical person," and I'm like, I almost want to say, "Are you? Are you really logical?" Because if you see the creation and you don't believe that there's a creator, and you think all of this is just here, and you've tried to explain it with only scientific means, you're not listening to anything, which I would argue good science leads you to a designer. I mean, I think that there's a lot of good arguments for that. But if you look at it and say that, are you being logical? I don't think you are. But a lot of people only think of logic in the terms of, can I understand it in a non-supernatural way, a materialistic way?
Which really just diminishes how much we can even know if we're limiting ourselves to what we can see, touch, taste.
Yeah,
hear,
use our
smell,
senses.
empirically verify is what the term they use.
That's right.
If that's what you're limited to, man, a lot in what you can know to be true.
Big time. Yeah.
Like if this is how much we can know versus this being everything there is to know, that circle just gets even smaller.
That's right.
With
how puny, not only how puny we actually are, which in that sense people argue, oh, well, you know, that gives us a sense of, you know, finitude. And I was like, that's true. It does show how small we are,
right.
But it also shows that we can't know anything for sure.
You also can't.
It's hopeless.
You can't empirically verify that you can only trust to be true what you can empirically verify. Like it's an assumption.
It's an assumption that you have that's unverifiable.
Yeah,
I mean,
you don't even know if your senses are accurate. You gotta trust that.
It's the Matrix, man.
Yeah.
It's watching the Matrix movie.
It's my head here.
Yeah, I just pull this card out, and maybe the information I'm being fed is wrong.
Right.
So people, but you know who believes this kind of stuff? I mean, if you look at the videos that were up here before he passed away, you know, you saw, and I always forget his name, which is sad because I've read a lot of his stuff. I've read a lot of his articles. Guy in the wheelchair passed away recently. Brilliant. Hawking always, like recently, if you look up Stephen Hawking in recent videos, he has a whole video basically on like our perception is only what we make of it in our minds.
And I mean, that's all you can have if you don't have a God.
But how do we even have that?
Yeah.
How do you know that your mind is even creating perception accurately? You don't.
Right.
There's no way to. So if you're not saying that something outside of me has spoken to me that unites everything, we're going deep, guys. Sorry. That unites everything together. What Christians call a God's eye viewpoint of the world. Then how in the world can we make sense out of anything?
Yeah.
I think that's the tricky part. If God hasn't spoken, how can I truly know anything?
Right.
And I think that's and people fall into great depression. People are scared. I mean, it's like coronavirus. Like, well, you know, how do we know we're being told the right things? I mean,
yeah. Well, and that's not to say that you can't go out and use scientific principles.
Sure, you can.
Yeah, I mean, in fact, we probably should try to seek to understand and to appreciate this world around us and know how it works, because it deepens our love and affection for the God who created it.
Sure.
But at the same time, we've got to be told that we even can do that.
That's right. We assume, right?
Yeah.
We're making assumptions that when we go outside every day, that the ground's not going to disappear underneath our feet.
Yeah, there's a reason that the scientific revolution was kickstarted by Christians, and not raging edgelord atheists in their mother's basement, but people who actually deeply value God's creation and wanted to study and learn it. And it wasn't this they started to learn more about it and see that God didn't exist. No, that's not necessarily the case.
No.
Is there a divide between scientism and religion? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Faith-seeking understanding has always been the route that has produced so many healthy things in our culture, even, right? I mean, there's a lot of people who argue this nowadays, and though I hate the word flourishing, I probably hate the word flourishing about as much as the Chick-fil-A worker hates my pleasure. Because I hear it all the time in philosophy and culture, and this leads to human flourishing. That leads to human flourishing. Unfortunately, though, it is true. Christianity, properly understood, does lead to human flourishing. It's honest about our sin. It's honest about our need. It tries to take care of the oppressed when understood in a biblical way. We do care about one another because we're one humanity.
And it's also got an end goal. It's got a clear end goal, which is the new creation. And restoration.
That's right.
Otherwise,
we're not overly optimistic about what's going to happen now either. I mean,
otherwise you're working towards the.
Sorry, for some reason our internet is trash today.
I think we're good now.
So I apologize if you lost us there. But basically, if nihilism, especially for young people, is a real reality, right? I mean, there's lots of young people and adults who come to the conclusion that if there is no God, nothing really matters. So why
is there is no God? I mean,
it is, but by golly, I don't know about the rest of you, but if nothing else, out of self-preservation, you might want to investigate that a bit.
Well, yeah, our desire speaks against that. And
that's
it's just the naturally inherent desire in all people universally.
That's right. That we care about our existence, that we care about the existence even of others. I mean...
Nietzsche.
Friedrich Nietzsche,
father of nihilism. There's a reason why apologists love him. It's because he's just so consistent with how atheistic he is, because man, that guy had a depressing life.
He did.
Um,
I mean, that's what it leads to, and the question is that truth? I mean, that's the whole. That's the thing. They're like, well, I'd rather be depressed and believe in the truth. I was like, how do you even know you're believing in the truth?
Mm.
I mean, you don't. You have no guarantees. And if it does, and that's what the truth leads to, then the truth leads to misery.
Christopher Hitchens, a
Yes.
famous atheist, debated a lot of Christians. He died a few years ago.
He knows better now.
Well, yeah, he does. I don't know where he was when he ended, but either way, his soul is somewhere.
He knows better now. That's right.
But he was at some sort of Q&A something, and someone in the audience, presumably a Christian, stood up and asked the question and said, if God isn't real and none of this matters, why do you make it your goal to tear down Christians? Or something like really accusatory, like your life's work. And he chimes in and he says, well, I mean, I wouldn't call it my life.